Saw dudes, many of you have been asking for the Panzer Vulpaphyla builds I use in my videos, specifically for my build guides. I don't like giving out basic answers because use cases will always differ. So today I am making the ultimate build guide for the Panzer Vulpaphyla with a ton of builds and mod rationale so that you can mod yours according to your needs. I hope this video helps you all since it definitely helped me in creating new builds and trying new things. Without further delay, let's get started. Before even talking about mods, I'll briefly discuss how to obtain a Panzer Vulpaphyla. You can watch me botch the process in the background and still manage to capture one. The Panzer is considered a rare Vulpaphyla species and only appears during the fast rotation on the Cambrian Drift. To obtain one, you will need to capture a weakened Panzer Vulpaphyla via conservation after the infested has attacked it. In addition, you will need a mutagen and an antigen, which can be bought from Sun for 5,000 credits. To simplify the conservation process, you will need to buy a trank rifle, Vulpaphyla Echo Lure, and Vulpaphyla pheromones. Technically, the Vulpaphyla pheromones are optional, but they increase the chance of a Panzer variant spawning. After buying the rifle, the lure, and optionally pheromones, put them in your gear wheel so you can equip them in the field. After getting all the gear, launch into the Cambrian Drift and make sure it's not Steel Path. You will hate your existence if it is. Then open the gear wheel and equip the trank rifle and have the Vulpa Echo Lure and pheromones ready. Then find a Vulpaphyla conservation point. Look around the Cambrian Drift for conservation markers or piles of scat. When you aim at a scat pile, the HUD text will tell you what animal it's for, such as a Vulpaphyla trail start point. Interact with it to start tracking the Vulpaphyla. At the final call point, you will be prompted to take out the Echo Lure. Before going ahead, take this time to use the Vulpaphyla pheromones to have a higher chance of attracting a Panzer Vulpaphyla. Now you can equip the Vulpaphyla Echo Lure. Hold the fire button to play the full call sound. Watch the small gauge. Keep the pointer in the white brackets to accurately copy the animal's call. If you do it correctly, you'll hear the Vulpaphyla answer. Repeat the call if needed until the animal appears. When an animal arrives, take a second to confirm that the nameplate overhead reads Panzer Vulpaphyla. To have it become a companion, the Panzer needs to be weakened. To do so, it has to take damage from local infested enemies. Knowing this, when a Panzer appears, do not kill it with a weapon or companion. I recommend just leaving the old one at home. Allow nearby infested to attack it until it's clearly damaged and starting to glow or stagger. Keep enemies from finishing it off. You want to hurt it, not dead. I personally rush in and eliminate enemies with a single target weapon if they are really trying to get money out of my soon-to-be companion. Now use your trank rifle. Because of its thick armor-like hide, Panzers require 3 trank shots to be entirely subdued, rather than just 1. Run up to the sleeping, glowing Panzer and interact with it when prompted, and a small drone from Sun will appear, collect the animal, and convert it to a Panzer Vulpaphyla tag for you. The better the capture quality, the more tags you will get. But you only need at least 1 weakened Panzer tag to proceed with revivification, whatever that word is. And that's about it. Before covering any builds, let's cover the essential mods for the Panzer Vulpaphyla build. I don't feel like repeating myself when covering the builds, since all of the mods will be on every build. It's also important to keep in mind that everything featured today is targeted towards base Steel Path content, all the way up to level cap Void Cascade. If you just want to see the builds, please use the timestamps to skip to the desired sections. There are 6 mods in total that are essential: Viral Quills, Martyr Symbiosis, Calculated Redirection, Reinforced Bond, Tenacious Bond, and Fetch. Viral Quills allows the Panzer Vulpaphyla to prime enemies with viral stats effects and deal fairly decent damage outside of regular attacks. Quills have 24% crit chance, 2.2 times critical damage multiplier, and a 40% status chance. They are affected by critical chance, critical damage, elemental damage, status chance, and elemental conversion mods such as Shocking Claws that can be equipped on the Panzer's claws, making for interesting interactions with Archon Stretch. If the Quills inflict a viral proc, a spore is created similar to Siren Spores, which inflict viral damage every second and apply viral procs. Then there's Martyr Symbiosis, which causes the Vulpaphyla to sacrifice itself to heal its owner. When this mod is equipped, Magenta Tethers will briefly link the Vulpaphyla and any nearby corpses as health is stored. When the Warframe's health falls below the 10% threshold, they gain 1 second of invulnerability while the stored health is transferred to them. This invulnerability phase does not purge negative status effects on the Warframe. This is a crucial survivability mod and makes runs of Void Cascades much smoother. Then there's Calculated Redirection, which coincides with Reinforced Bond. Calculated Redirection increases the Panzer's total shield capacity to 1,295, granting a massive increase in overall survivability, while also satisfying the activation requirement for Reinforced Bond. Since the Panzer has over 1,200 maximum shields, the 60% fire rate buff from Reinforced Bond will remain active regardless of its actual moment-to-moment shield number. That said, if the Panzer does go down, so will the buff. It will have to be revived to benefit once again. The reloading benefit is just a cherry on top. Tenacious Bond is essential for all outgoing weapon damage. The mod's activation criteria is based on the Panzer's claws. The 1.2 times critical multiplier is a flat final buff and brings more free damage to the table. The mod also helps reduce the Panzer's incapacitation timer on headshots, allowing for Reinforced Bond to be active much more often. Finally, there's Fetch. It's a Warframe. You need a loot vacuum to make the game easier and collect more loot. If for some reason you don't want to use it, Just don't, but don't talk to me or come near me. Bear with me. Now let's rapid fire the optional mods. These mods may appear on builds, but again, I don't feel like repeating myself all the time in that section of the video. If you already know what all the mods on companions do, feel free to skip this section. Let's begin with Panzer Devolution. This mod causes the Panzer to devolve into its larval form upon death and attack enemies with projectiles, dealing viral damage and infecting them with spores. The Vulpaphyla will respawn after 30 seconds. Panzer Devolution prevents bleed out, and thus the Vulpaphyla cannot be revived normally. Its transformation cannot be sped up either. This mod isn't bad per se, but there are better options. Additionally, with the way that bond mods work, the 30-second lockout with its larval form is more of a punishment than a direct upgrade. Now let's cover Primed Animal Instinct, Tech Assault, Medi Pet Kit, and Synth Deconstruct. Primed Animal Instinct provides a loot and enemy radar. Loot radar can be helpful, and enemy radar is nice for clearing rooms and spotting groups, but neither is essential. Tech Assault provides an additional layer of survivability to the Panzer by giving it a chance to ignore death. This is a nice way to prevent death if Panzer Devolution is swapped, but given how many mods can reduce the Panzer's incapacitation timer, it's non-essential too. Medi Pet Kit falls within the same category. The health regen per second is decent in lower level missions, but it falls apart when the Panzer is open to high burst damage. The most valuable part of the mod is the lowered companion recovery time. Lastly, in this particular section of the non-essential mods, there is Synth Deconstruct. This mod allows enemies that have been damaged by any means by the Panzer to have a 25% chance to drop a health orb on death. This mod is essential for Warframe builds that have Equilibrium or Violent Archon shards, but not every Warframe build will use that. Time to cover the other bond mods. In this section we have Aerial Bond, Duplex Bond, Momentous Bond, Mystic Bond, Tandem Bond, Seismic Bond, and Vicious Bond. Aerial Bond causes airborne kills to reduce the incapacitation timer of the Panzer by 3 seconds. This reduction is increased to 9 seconds on airborne headshot kills, which does stack with Tenacious Bond. While airborne, the Panzer will create a cold field that slows and applies status procs to enemies. This is useful for frames that naturally stay airborne, like Zephyr and Titania, or for players who enjoy utilizing aim gliding with their parkour movement. Duplex Bond is a niche mod that allows the Panzer to clone itself whenever 100 energy is expended by the Warframe. There can be up to 3 clones at a given time, and enemies killed by these clones have a chance at dropping an energy orb. The clones are completely invulnerable to any form of damage and can only die after their listed lifespan has elapsed. They also attract aggro from enemies, making it easier to survive. That being said, they do not use the original companion's abilities and can only use basic attacks. They are strictly relegated to aggro diversion and possibly creating energy orbs, though this falls off in higher levels. Momentous Bond causes Eximus kills to grant the companion a random elemental damage bonus for 30 seconds and reduce the Panzer's recovery time by 18 seconds. This mod is considered optional, but is a mainstay on most of my builds simply due to the massive recovery bonus. The elemental bonus can be triggered by the Warframe or companion killing the Eximus enemies. The elements from the buff do not combine with existing elements on the companion weapons. Mystic Bond is useful for reducing energy expenditure over time. Viral Quills qualifies as an ability with cooldowns and has a relatively short one at 4 seconds. Mystic Bond is especially useful on frames that spam abilities often, which have high energy costs. Tandem Bond is exclusively for melee gameplay. Companion melee hits on enemies can reset the Warframe's melee combo timer, allowing it to stay stacked for buffs from Blood Rush and Weeping Wounds. The heavy melee damage multiplier can help extend the Panzer Vulpaphyla's damage scaling into later levels. Seismic Bond causes the Panzer's melee attacks to emit 4-meter shockwaves as long as a channeled ability is active. In addition, the attacks will grant stacking ability efficiency to the Warframe, up to 30%. For frames with an illegible channeling ability, this is a great bonus to have since it reduces energy droughts. Finally, there's Vicious Bond, which causes the Panzer's melee attacks to strip 50% of enemy armor. If the enemy was damaged by an ability within the past 10 seconds, each melee hit by the companion will also cause enemies within 9 meters of the hit enemy to have 15% of their armor removed. Enemy armor is a pain in the rear when going through endurance missions, so this mod can be helpful depending on the faction. Then there's the Retrieve Relina mods. These do not offer performance benefits in missions. Instead, they grant a chance to double pickups like credits or resources. These mods are only useful for farming their respective items and should only be used on casual missions or for dedicated farming runs. Alright, since all of the mods have been covered, let's begin covering the builds. The first build is a basic all-rounder setup for lazy mission farming. It's what I use in between making videos because I try to have a life. Panzer Devolution is on the build to make my life a bit easier and worry less about reducing the recovery time. Resourceful Retriever grants an 18% chance to double resource pickups, which is a godsend when farming for resources with farming frames like Necros or Hydroid. Synth Deconstruct allows the build to support warframes that use Equilibrium and makes their energy economy a much smaller issue. Primed Animal Instinct grants an enhanced enemy radar and loot radar for better quality of life. After revising my builds, I would not bring this build into level cap void cascade, especially if I am trying to make my life easy. It's a good build, but it is generally meant for relaxing, base steel path content. The second build is tailored for caster frames. Panzer Devolution has been taken off since it doesn't offer the most significant benefits throughout the mission. With Tenacious Bond and Aerial Bond, the Panzer's recovery time can be drastically reduced. Mystic Bond reduces energy expenditure over time alongside Seismic Bond. However, Seismic Bond is only useful when a channeled ability is used, which not every frame has. If that is the case, it can be swapped for either Duplex Bond or Vicious Bond. Synth Deconstruct stays on the build for Equilibrium or Violent Archon Shard synergy. The third build is another caster setup, with the only change being the lack of Synth Deconstruct. In its place is Momentous Bond, which, on top of Aerial Bond and Tenacious Bond, makes the Panzer revive incredibly fast. Some Warframes don't require Equilibrium or Violent Archon Shards, and can use this build to bring more utility to the Panzer's kit than the other build. Again, if the Warframe being used does not possess a channeling ability, swap out Seismic Bond for another bond or utility mod of your choice. The next build is for summoner frames, like Necros and Caliban. Medi Pet Kit reduces the incapacitation timer for the Panzer. Tech Assault grants the Panzer a 60% chance to ignore any kind of lethal damage and become immune to all damage for 4 seconds. This mod can make the Panzer take away a ton of aggro on top of Duplex Bond's clones. Duplex Bond clones, which are counted as companions, will benefit from companion bonuses such as Summoner's Wrath. Summoner frames usually have this aura slotted in to begin with, which synergizes well with the Panzer's damage output potential. The clones from Duplex Bond add to the overall insanity of summoned units. It's super fun and detracts aggro away from the main Warframe. Keep in mind that Medi Pet Kit can be swapped for any bond mod of your choice. Then we have the dedicated melee weapon build. If you enjoy using melee weapons, this build is for you. This build does not include Exalted weapons though. That's the next and final build. Pack Leader heals the Panzer by 100 health for every melee hit. If the Panzer is already at maximum health, the healing is converted to Overguard, with a 1200 point cap. Tandem Bond allows the melee combo counter timer to be reset on companion hits and increases the Panzer's outgoing damage when performing a heavy attack with a Warframe. Vicious Bond increases the damage of melee attacks by stripping armor from enemies. If the melee weapon isn't slash focused, this mod is handy. Finally, we have the dedicated Exalted melee build. Pack Leader is still on the build for the healing and Overguard generation Exalted melee weapons can supply to the Panzer. Keep in mind that the Prime version should be used, I just don't have it. The range portion of the melee attacks, like Excalibur's sword waves, do apply Pack Leader's effects. Synth Deconstruct reappears once again to provide energy through Equilibrium, which most Exalted melee weapon frames use, since energy over time effects cannot be used while channeling. However, this is perfect as it allows seamless use of Seismic Bond. The 30% bonus to ability efficiency can make casting other abilities much cheaper and improves energy economy. On to the claws. Unlike the Panzer Vulpaphyla mod section, I will cover the build right from the start. 5 of the 8 main build slots on the build are taken up by essential mods, and even the optional mods feel pretty necessary. The only variation I have is in the posture slot, which I will cover last for the sake of brevity. Starting from the main modding section, we have Bite, which increases critical chance and damage, well past the threshold to activate Tenacious Bond's critical damage bonus on all weapons. Maul provides a 330% bonus to base melee damage. Precision Conditioning adds 385% melee damage. Shocking Claws adds 330% electricity damage and status chance, while also converting all elemental damage from the claws to electricity damage. This mod is vital since it causes Viral Quills to inherit the electricity damage, which can proc Archon Stretch on Warframes. It's also important to note that the mod only converts primary elemental damage. Secondary elemental damage, like Radiation from Radon Claws and Magnetic from Magnetic Claws, will not be converted. Swipe increases the Panzer's attack range and allows it to hit multiple enemies per strike. Radon Claws add 60% radiation damage and 80% critical damage. Magnetic Claws add 60% magnetic damage and grants 40% status duration. This is helpful for any status application from the Panzer. This leads into the final mod, Immunity Resistance, which adds 50% status damage. Onto the posture mods. Assassin Posture, the one currently shown on the build, causes the Panzer to prioritize attacking Eximus units or other high-ranking enemies. It also grants the Panzer an additional 300% damage to Overguard, making it a true HVT dispatcher. The other viable option is Protector Posture. Protector Posture keeps the Panzer close and only allows it to attack enemies within 15 meters. It also causes the attacks to inflict 4 puncture procs on enemies, making their attacks deal 40% less damage and causing weapon damage against them to have a flat 20% increase to critical chance. For weapon damage scaling, this can be helpful. And that is it for the video. Many of you know the Panzer Vulpaphyla is one of, if not the strongest, companions in the game. There's no need for me to harp on how good it is. I hope the builds featured in the video are of help. While my playstyle is catered towards optimization of level cap content, it doesn't mean yours has to. I cannot stress this enough, but please swap out mods that are more comfortable for you. The name of the game is to find what works for you and run with it. Let me know what you think. If you have any suggestions or thoughts, leave them in the comments. As always, thank you all for watching and happy farming. Stay safe.